Today, Singapore celebrates 56 years of independence. So happy birthday, Singapore. I'm going to sketch this lion statue. Let's go. Based on the request of somebody, one of the audience, to put some of my videos on real-time mode, I decided to do this one on real time. So if you think this is too slow for you, just put it on speed up mode. YouTube allows you to speed it up to 2x, twice the speed. So please do so if you find this too slow. So I'm going to draw with not my favorite Palomino pencil, but with my favorite fountain pen. This is a Sailor Fluid Nib, bended nib, in other words, fountain pen. Used it all the time. When I'm using it straight up, it is thin. When I'm using it at a gradient, lower gradient, the line is thicker. So I can get thin or thick based on how I hold the pen. Anyway, at this point, as you know, I always just do the outline. So here we go, just the outline. Very simple, nothing very complicated. You're just copying the silhouette of the statue. That's it. That's the first step that you need to get to, and after that we will fill in the blank. As it's a holiday here in Singapore, we had a pretty relaxing day. This morning we woke up a bit early and went for a cycle. We did about 28 kilometers. Multiplied by the two of us, we did 56 kilometers combined. So in celebration of the 56th years of independence, and it's also our first year as Singaporeans. We became naturalized Singaporean last year, and this is the first year we're celebrating the National Day along with our fellow citizens of Singapore. Anyway, let's get back to the sketch. If you observe the lines, they are simple, lines. You just gotta make sure that it is readable. The concept of readability of a sketch is very important, and I think oftentimes beginners are just too worried about lines and lines here, lines there, but they are not thinking about how their audience will be reading it. So this keyword, readability, whenever you put down a line or put down a color or a spot or a shape or whatever it is, just think, is this readable? Is this more readable than otherwise? If I don't have that line or that shape, if it's readable, it means that your audience will recognize what you're trying to do. The legs, the fingers, the texturing on the stone, whatever it is that you put down, make sure it is readable. And it's your job as the artist to make sure that your audience can read it, right? I mean, after all, why do you put down a line? Not just because it's fun. Yes, sketching is fun, but you also want it to be readable. And when your audience can read it, that's even more fun, right? So just remember, every time you draw, every single line you put down, does this make the sketch more readable? You can see that in my sketch here, not every line is accurate, right? But every single line is put down with confidence. It's not because I'm a more confident person, maybe it is, but the idea is that when you put down a line, you don't want to be tentative, you don't want to be scratchy, you don't want it to be 100 lines just to define one, right? You want it to be confident, full of energy, and the line should show that you are drawing with confidence. And even if you make a mistake, it should be a confident mistake, because the confidence is more important than the correct nature or the mistake nature, right? If it's going to be a mistake, you might as well make it a confident mistake, because then it is still aesthetically pleasing. Trust me, that's what I think. And I think many people will, see it, because even though it's wrong, it will still be aesthetically pleasingly wrong. And that's better than a no confidence stroke. And believe me, your audience will see a line that has no confidence behind it. So when you've committed to make a line, go for it. Don't be tentative and just go for it. Make the line full of energy, right? Okay, so enough said about confidence behind line. I do have a video about lines, go look it up. I talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of lines, and one of them being energy and confident. As you can see, surely, and the little definitions of fingers and muscles and so on comes to bear. And all of these are filling in the blank. Remember that I started with a outline. At the end of the day, I'm just filling in the blank right now. So that's the finished sketch, as you can see. I've decided with this sketch, what I'll do is I'll keep it simple, minimalism if you like, no fuss. So I mix myself sort of a purplish mix, permanent alizarin crimson, dashed of French ultramarine, thrown in with a bit of dioxin purple, and that's it. So I follow the lines as I see it, and I basically try to put down the negative shape behind the statue, and don't forget the little hole that between the armpit if you like, and then try to cover it up for the rest of the shape of negative shape, if you like. Very simple sketch to make that stone statue pop, if you like. The negative shape just basically define the space for the statue, which is in front of the negative shape or the floor. I think that is the simplest thing to observe when you see something sitting on something else, and to differentiate between the two space, the space where the lion statue sits and then the floor. You just use negative space, and negative space is so easy, right? I dab in a few splotches of cadmium yellow, and a few splotches of cadmium orange, just for texturing. And it's something I do all the time. I mean, I have a purple background and drop in a couple of splatter some cadmium. That has always worked for me, and let the water flow a little bit and let it disperse, and take out the excess moisture and let it dry. So that's really the first layer of background that I have done. Nothing very spectacular, not very complicated. Anybody can do that, right? At this stage, my plan of attack is relatively simple still. I don't intend to color all of the statue. After all, it's white, right? So I'm going to go in and define all the shadowy parts of the statue. You can squint your eyes, look at the photograph, and you will see where the dark parts are, the shadow part. It's the underbelly, it's the open mouth, it's the underneath the two front paws, and all the shadow parts underneath the stone slab at the bottom as well. So not very complicated. You can observe it, and I'm going to use dark colors, combination of red, blue, purple, whatever you can get your hands on, as long as you can hit a value of 4, 4.5, 3.5, even out of a scale of 5. That's probably good enough, right? And later on, we will soften some of the edges with water, but at the moment, I'm just going in to define the darkest dark, as I can see it. Very simple process, not very complicated. Go for variety of blue, variety of red, and again, because the color scheme is yellow purple, so any combination of red, blue, and will make purple, right? And some parts of the purple can be more bluish, some parts of the purple can be more reddish. And again, this is the theme of variety. And in any sketch, when you have variety, it is always more interesting than it's a bland single hue throughout, right? Of course, if you're doing illustration, that's different, but if you're doing a sketch, you want variety of hues, and that's why it's always good to have two colors to stretch the single hue that you're using. In this case, purple, push it to red, push it to blue, and so on and so forth, right? I'm also looking at the shadow at the back of the lion statue, and I'm gonna use gradation to water down towards the left as I as I move from right dark to left diluted, right? shadow is what gives form to 3 dimensions. So if you look at the stone statue here, you will see that the shadows are subtle. They are basically from a value of, let's say, 1, and where the white stone slab would be, let's say, 1, you will end up with value of shadow between 2 and 3, and only in parts you will maybe reach 4. For example, the underbelly or the gap of the mouth, and maybe at the bottom of the stone slab underneath where it touches the ground. Those could be the parts where it's closer to maybe 4. But you can always exaggerate the shadow a little bit, because you are the artist, you are the sketcher, you can decide, right? And you can strengthen the shadow so that you can see, or your audience can see the shadows a little bit better. If you leave it too light, I'm afraid you need a lot more skills, and some of you may have that, right? Because you may not be beginner sketcher, but because you can then really play with the contrast of 2 and 3 and make it really, beautiful. And that's possible because when you're very, very good with your ability to manage pigments and so on, you can certainly play with narrower margins of error or narrower contrast. So you're playing with value of 2 versus 3, as opposed to, you can see here I'm playing with 4, the darkest dark that I can put down behind the hair, if you like, or the mane of the statue. That's not reality, because in reality that's probably a value of 2 or 3 against a value of 1. But I'm using 4 against a value of 1 just to make it more, more defined, and the form is more defined as well, right? So that's just something to note, that you can exaggerate shadow gradation. No harm in that. You are the artist after all. And again, that is also something that I mentioned earlier, is to make it more readable. Oftentimes when you are not aggressive with your contrast, your sketch may not be as readable. By making it more readable, you make your audience more clear what they are seeing, and therefore your sketch easier to interpret. From here on, you will see that I will be layering the second layer, the third layer, and this is one of the beauty of watercolor, where you layer multiple layers just to get sense of contrast of value as well. I'm also taking the opportunity of layering by defining the lines. You can see the lines on the floor where there are marbles. I think they are marbles, and the lines define the 3-dimensional space, and how perspective as well is being woven into the sketch as well. So those lines are opportunities, and beginners often are very afraid or makes those lines, the lines becomes a part of the worry. But I would say, the lines are opportunity, right? You can ignore it, or you can use it to define space, and you can choose to ignore stuff. Like, for example, I ignore all the green stuff above the mane or above the statue. Those are distraction. If I put it in, I could put it in, but then it'll be difficult to interpret because I have very little space. It is, after all, postcards, and it's such a small sketch anyway. Now I just kind of dribble a little bit of, for texturing purposes, just some splotch of splatter, some purples onto the paper. I think I'm kind of done. I'm not going to do too much with this. I think the sketch kind of worked. So at some point you will overdo it. One of the hardest thing about sketch is how to start with a blank piece of paper. The second hardest thing is when to stop, right? That's equally hard, sometimes harder, in fact, when to stop. And you can be doing it, sketching it, putting in and dabbling in it, and then before you know it, it's ruined, right? So it's a tough one. So anyway, I decided to stop for now, put in my name, and my trusty little seal, the 2 Chinese character, Whee Teck or Whee Teck. And yeah, so and then put in the date, which is the 2021 August 09, which is the birthday of Singapore. Right, so that's it, I think, and my name at the bottom, Whee Teck, which is the Romanized version of my Chinese name. So I think this sketch is more or less there. It's always good to just take a break from your sketch, go for a cup of coffee and wait for it to dry, and then do some evaluation. So after a bit of evaluation, I decided I needed a bit more shadow, and this is what I call the edit phase. Very often beginners think that watercolor can't be edited or can't be corrected. Well, that is incredibly wrong, actually. In fact, watercolor can be edited, and that's the edit phase at the end that you need to perform. Usually after the sketch is dry and after you have taken your eyes off it for a little while, take a short break and come back. You can do quite a lot of things with watercolor in terms of edit. You can add more layers, which is what I'm doing, a bit more shadow, usually the mid-tones, not the darkest dark here, but probably the value of 2 or 3, just to buffer in some of the harsh contrast that I have in the sketch, and also put a bit more line so that the three-dimensional form of the statue is a little bit more defined. And it's also possible that you could put a bit of water onto the sketch and then use a stiff brush to lift pigment off to lighten it. There's a few things you can do with edit, actually. In fact, so that allows you to define more things. So that's my sketch for Singapore Independence, 56 Independence, that is. So stay safe wherever you are. This is Whee Teck out.